TG Wolff here. Today's story is an adaptation of The Billiard Room Mystery by Brian Flynn, originally published in 1927. This and many other genre-busting stories have entered the public domain and are being preserved through the work of Project Gutenberg. They are an online library of free public domain ebooks. Check out the link in the show notes that goes directly to their detective and mystery story bookshelf with over 875 books. Christie, Fletcher, Poe, Wallace, Ortsey. These are the brilliant minds that created the genre that we all love today. Welcome to Mysteries to Die For. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. All of our stories are structured to challenge you to beat the detective to the solution. These are arrangements, which means instead of word-for-word readings, you get a performance that's meant to be heard. Jack and I perform these live, front to back, no breaks, no takes, no fakes, no retakes, even when I do that on the opening paragraph. This is Season 7, Games People Play. Games are about competition conducted according to rules with participants working toward a goal. Games are a part of every culture and are one of the oldest forms of social interaction and engagement. Games can be fun, challenging and exhilarating. They can also be intense, cutthroat, and lethal. This season, our authors have fashioned deadly games and unscrupulous villains to test your detection skills. Episode 16, Billards, is the featured game. This is Death in the Billiards Room by TG Wolff, a short story adaptation of the novel The Billiard Room Mystery by Brian Flynn. Okay, before we get started, it's allergy season.
I need to know, how unscrupulous is this villain?
This one's pretty good.
Pretty unscrupulous?
This one was almost like, I'm writing this in 1927 for Jack Wolff.
Interesting.
But yes, what I wanted to tell listeners is that it is allergy season. If you listened to the episode 2 weeks ago, you will see that my voice cracked like, a prepubescent boy. And I've taken measures against that. I am heavily drugged, and hopefully my voice will last. But I'll just apologize ahead of time for any reality that may sneak into our fun here.
Sad.
Sad but true.
That's a great Metallica song.
Sad but true?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I'll have to listen to it after the show.
Yup, I think it's Metallica at least.
Oh. A starting point. October 1929. Enough time has passed since the fateful events that I feel I can tell the story of Jerry Prescott and his death in the billiard room. But where to start? This is harder than I expected. If I start too early, you'll lose patience with me and press the fast forward button. If I start too late, you'll be confused and, again, press the fast forward button. So let's start with his last meal. All right then, here we go. A Fine English Dinner, July 1921. The spacious dining room in the Old English Manor was filled to capacity, both in terms of occupants and merriment. The reason for both was the annual house party at Considine Manor, which that very day featured a cricket match against a rival house. Considine had walked away with the victory. Sir Charles, the fine gentleman at the head of the table, spared no expense treating his family and team to the finest. Allow me to introduce them in a way that you will hopefully be able to remember. To Sir Charles's right sat his son-in-law, Captain Dick Arkwright. I'm going to have trouble with that name the whole time. Captain Dick Arkwright. The big, buff military man, he was the hero of the day and thus sat in the place of honor. Next to him was his wife Helen, who was the eldest Considine sibling. On Sir Charles's left sat his wife Evelyn. A charming woman, she ran the manor with the grace and efficiency and utmost pride. Next to her was the beautiful Mary, the youngest of the siblings. The rest of the table consisted of the cricket team, made up of several of us who were together at Oxford, and the balance of whom were acquaintances with Captain Arkwright. Next to Mary was her brother and my good friend, Jack Considine. Our friendship had only grown stronger since our university days. I, who answered to Bill Cunningham, was seated next to Jack. Across from Jack was Gary Prescott, who was the last man on the cricket team with Jack at Oxford. I was more than a competent player, and there were some who said I should have had Prescott's spot. Seated next to Prescott and across from me was Anthony Bathurst. He'd gone on from our school days to earn a reputation as a decent barrister. Next came Tom Tennant and Marcus Daventry, who were mates of mine, Jack and Bathurst, from Oxford as well. Tennant, Daventry, and I had been coming to Considine Manor for several years. This was the first year for Prescott, who met Sir Charles and Mary last summer. It was obvious to all that Jerry had a fondness for Mary. Even as we enjoyed the wonders created by Sir Charles's chef and discussed the cases of Poe's Dupin, Gaboreau's Lecoq, and Doyle's Holmes, Jerry's attention repeatedly strayed to the beautiful Mary. "I have no stomach for coincidence," Bathurst said in reply to a comment from Jack. "I admire Holmes because he deduces. So many others rely on coincidence and things of similar nature." He shook his head. "It is cheap at one end and cheating at the other." "Well, what do you think of Chesterton's Father Brown?" Mary asked. "Certainly you can't say he relies on coincidence." "I agree. He does not rely on coincidence," Bathurst replied. "He doesn't rely on any logic at all. Father Brown concludes that the dustman was the murderer because the shape of a slice of pie resembled the man's head. A reason to cut it off if I ever heard one." The table laughed. Bathurst was a good friend of mine, though life and careers had taken us in separate directions. I was delighted when he walked onto the pitch 2 mornings ago, a last-minute stand-in for one of Sir Charles's usuals. "There is a great gap between fiction and real life," said Lieutenant Andrew Barker, a friend of Arkwright's, from the end of the table. "Evidence and clues do not lay themselves out as nicely and neatly as these mystery writers would have us believe." "Agreed," said Major Roger Hornsby, who sat across from Barker. "I'll take Scotland Yard every time." "Perhaps," Sir Charles said thoughtfully, "Scotland Yard is a remarkably efficient organization, but sometimes—" "Give me a fair start," Bathurst said into the space of a breath. "Give me a fair start and similar resources, and I'll wager my results. All of you." Sir Charles tossed his napkin onto his plate, frowning disapprovingly. Now, Mr. Bathurst." "It's all in good fun," Jack said to his father before turning to Bathurst. "Father detests wagering. Your comment was an intellectual challenge, right, Bathurst?" Bathurst, who could always read a room, acquiesced. "As Jack has said, Sir Charles, my speech was nothing but rhetoric. After all, it's not like there's going to be a murder that requires investigating at any level, mine or Scotland Yard." "I should say not." Sir Charles rose and looked to his wife. "My darling, I'm ready for our game of bridge. Choose your partner wisely, as I'm feeling particularly lucky tonight." With his announcement, all of us pushed away from the table and climbed the stairs to the billiard room, which shared the floor with the family bedrooms. All except for Jack. His former bedroom was now Mary's sitting room, and so he stayed on the second floor with the rest of us guests. The billiard room spaciously held several modes of diversion. Upon entering, one couldn't help admire the billiard table waiting invitingly under a colorful chandelier. Prescott led the way, calling over his shoulder, "Who's up for a game?" Lieutenant Barker, Major Hornsby, and Tennant took up cues as Prescott began racking. 2 tables were set to one side for card games. Sir Charles pulled Daventry to the red felt table, while Lady Evelyn walked at a more dignified pace on the arm of Captain Arkwright. Sir Charles glared at his wife with an especially competitive expression, one which she utterly dismissed. I wondered how many games she'd won from the old gent. The July weather was particularly lovely, I remember. Whether playing cricket, walking through the manor grounds, or spending time in the garden, The days were sunny and warm, the nights dry and cool. Jack opened a balcony door. "The rain has stopped," he announced. "I think I'll go down to the garden for a smoke." "I'll join you," Bathurst called out, and the pair left the room for the garden below. I settled at the billiard table, a spectator, not a player. The decision was better for my wallet, as Prescott, Lieutenant Barker, Major Hornsby, and Tennant quietly played for more than just bragging rights. Helen sat down at the pianoforte, and Mary sang, providing a lovely backdrop for the evening. Sir Charles either cackled with glee or chided Daventry, depending on the outcome of the hand. Daventry looked longingly at the billiard table. Captain Arkwright masterfully divided his attention between his cards and his wife. Lady Evelyn smiled demurely, like an English Mona Lisa. Prescott handedly ran the table between his glances at Mary Constantine. I could not tell and did not know if Mary encouraged his attention. She blushed, though, giving a smile not unlike her mother's. It was near midnight when Jack and Bathurst came back inside. Sir Charles used the interruption to call the end of the game and the night. His wife rose and took his arm without argument. She had no need, for she and Captain Arkwright clearly had won. Lieutenant Barker bent over the edge of the billiard table and scribbled on a piece of paper. He handed it over to Prescott begrudgingly and with a fierce expression on his face. "An IOU, if I wasn't mistaken." I stood and stretched. I took what was left of my whiskey to the balcony and stepped out into the night. Darkness engulfed us. Considine Manor could have been alone in England for all I could see. Ready to retire, I said my good nights and left the billiard room. At the foot of the staircase, I passed Prescott and Barker in deep conversation, which halted as I approached. "Going to bed?" I asked. "Not yet," Prescott said. "Besides, I'm off then," I said, not waiting for his sentence to finish. The night was long. I didn't sleep much or well. It was nearly 5 when I finally dozed off. Murder, help, murder. A woman's scream roused me from my too short slumber. "Murder! Help! Help, please!" An anguished mewl followed. I kicked off my covers and hastily pulled on my robe. Throwing open my door, I found the gentleman of the floor running down the hallway. I joined Lieutenant Barker, whose room was the only one beyond mine. "What in the world is going on?" I asked, as we caught up with Hornsby and Daventry. The answer came from the floor below us. "Murder!" Barker moved faster. "I don't know, but it sounds as if your friend Bathurst may have the intellectual challenge he wanted." At the bottom of the stairs, the double doors to the billiard room were gapped open. As we descended, we saw into the room, to the billiard table, and to the body draped over it. "Close the doors," Jack ordered, pulling the left one shut. "Father, keep Mother and the girls away. Arkwright, ring for a constable." A maid of about my own age huddled against the doorframe. Terror was stamped on her face as she rocked herself back and forth. I fought my way to the front and stood to protect her. "Who is it, Jack?" Bathurst came out of the billiard room, pulling the other door behind him. "Jerry Prescott," he said, "and he has been murdered." The maid cried out from behind me. Mary hugged her sister tightly. Are you certain he's dead?" "Yes," Bathurst said sadly. "I'm certain." Major Hornsby took up the position Arkwright had vacated as the house staff assembled. "We must protect the scene until somebody of authority arrives." Bathurst nodded sharply. "Agreed. Sir Charles, if you and Bill will stay with me, I suggest the rest of you dress, then go down and assemble for breakfast. There'll be questions we all must answer." I handed the distraught maid off to the butler with orders for tea with honey and brandy. With the shock of the morning, it took people some time to disperse. The family turned down the hallway, disappearing around the corner. The remaining guests, Jack included, climbed the stairs to the assigned bedrooms. The house staff descended the steps to the ground floor. It was only when Sir Charles, Bathurst, and I were alone that Bathurst turned and reopened the door. We didn't enter, but stood surveying the scene. From the waist up, Jerry Prescott laid across the billiard table. His legs dangled uselessly to the floor. His head was turned away from us, but it was easy to see what killed him. The jewel-encrusted handle of a dagger projected straight up from the back of his neck. "There is surprisingly little blood," Bathurst said, more musing to himself than to us. "Sir Charles, I would ask that you appoint me as your representative in this matter." My representative?" Sir Charles repeated, his gaze affixed to the blemish on his billiards table. "I have no need for a barrister, unless you are—" "Not at all," Bathurst said quickly, "but your interests and those of Considine name must be protected. Name me as your knight. Bill and I here will work alongside the legal authorities, be present every step of the way, so nothing unfortunate happens to your family." I do not know why Bathurst chose me as his man, but I didn't object. I stayed quiet, the dutiful sidekick. "Yes, I see what you mean," Sir Charles spoke slowly, drawing out each word to create the time to think. Then he nodded sharply. "Consider yourself on retainer. I may not match the resources of Scotland Yard, but you will have what you need to ensure the name Considine does not become synonymous with murder. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll check on my wife and daughters." "And dress," Bathurst added, reclosing the door. He turned the key that perpetually sat in the lock and deposited it into the pocket of his dressing gown. "I imagine we will not have long to wait." Bathurst and I remained in place until Sir Charles rounded the corner to the family wing. Then we began to climb the stairs. "Are we to be Holmes and Watson, then?" I asked, a weak attempt to dispel the heaviness of the morning. "We're going to be better, Bill. Much, much better." Bathurst clapped me on the shoulder. "First, we dress, then we detect." Left hand, corner pocket.
Right hand, butt pocket.
Spare change, butt pocket. The clock chimed 10 as Bathurst reinserted the key in the lock and opened the billiard room for Inspector Batterley and his man Roper. Entering with them were Sir Charles, Bathurst, and myself. Unbeknownst to Batterley, Bathurst and I had made a thorough inspection of the scene prior to his arrival. "This is the way he was found. Nothing has been touched," Bathurst said, which was true. We had taken care to keep our examination visual. The maid entered the room just after 7 to clean and reset the room. Upon discovery, she screamed and awakened the house. You were called directly. Batterley circled Prescott. The rest of us followed. Prescott faced the balcony door, his eyes open and bulging, his lips blue. He laid somewhat on his right shoulder, his left arm extended with the hand nearly in the corner pocket. There were no balls or cues on the table. Prescott was dressed in the same costume he had worn the previous night, with one exception. "Who wears brown shoes with that suit?" Batterley asked as he squatted to inspect the footwear. "No one," Bathurst said. "He wasn't wearing those last night. And notice the laces." "Nothing touched, eh?" Batterley spared a moment to frown at Bathurst before returning to the shoes. "Relatively clean soles. Why, one of the laces is missing. And what kind of knot is that on the other? Recognize it, Roper?" The sidekick leaned over Superior's shoulders. "Not I." "Unusual," Bathurst said, but offered no more. "I've seen it before," I remarked, making a small contribution. "It's called an Ian knot." Batterley straightened. "So Mr. Prescott has the wrong shoes on, one lace missing, and the other tied in a fancy knot. Let's see what else he has to say." He searched the body with deft fingers, calling out his findings as he went. No wallet, no coin or currency, handkerchief up the left sleeve. Bathurst put his hand on my arm. "Inspector, did you say the handkerchief was up the left sleeve?" "Yes, Bathurst. It bears the initials GP. "With the knife in the neck, I would have expected more blood," Bathurst said. "If he'd been killed by the knife, there would have been." Batterley pulled back Prescott's collar. "Mr. Prescott was strangled with something thin. The knife was inserted after death." Beneath the starched collar was indeed a thin red welt. Could be we found where his shoestring went. Batterley waved Roper over. Help me get him to the floor. Perhaps we'll find the murder weapon. Batterley removed the dagger with gloved hands and set it carefully aside. Then the pair stretched Prescott out on the thick rug. Batterley continued his inspection. But this doesn't make sense, I said. Who stands around, allowing the lace to be removed from one shoe, only to be strangled with it? No one, Bathurst replied, but the murderer removing the lace while Prescott wore his shoes is only one of several options. No lace, Batterley said, rising to standing. No other signs of injury or restraint. He hasn't a knot on his head. He hasn't bruised his knuckles. There are no signs that he fought back. Perhaps he was drugged, Roper offered. It's possible, Batterley muttered, studying Prescott's face. There are no obvious signs, but we'll have the doctor weigh in on that. He looked around the room, noticing for the first time, perhaps, the disarray. One of the gaming tables had been shoved out of its normal position. 3 of the chairs laid on the back or side. The stand with the cues spilled the goods when it toppled, and an end table had been swept clean, the lamp, ashtray, and remnants of a cigar and ash laying nearby. And yet, Batterley says, the body shows no sign of a struggle. This was for show, then, to throw us off the scent. Bathurst pointed to an open window. That was closed when we left the room last night. Jack himself closed the balcony doors and both windows before we turned out the lights. I gasped and found myself the center of attention. I'm sure it didn't mean anything, but as I was going to bed, I came across Prescott and Lieutenant Barker in a whispered conversation. I spent the evening watching the billiards game. Prescott was the big winner, and I'm certain he left with Barker's marker. You'll have to ask him what the value was. Then, when I asked if he was turning in, Prescott began to indicate he had something else to do. A lack of curiosity drove me to leave before he finished his sentence. What if he was meeting someone? Could explain the shoes. Batterley studied me as he thought. You're postulating that he was meeting someone outside? I nodded. Why else change out of his dress shoes? It had rained last evening. He wouldn't want to ruin his shoes. Perhaps he went out the window and that's why it was open. Or, Roper added, he let someone in. Unlikely, the inspector said. In my experience, the unknown murdering intruder is a rarity. Bathurst stared at the window. Inspector, Bill and I will meet you in the parlor. I want to have a look at the beds outside the window. I had to hurry to keep up with my determined friend. Bathurst, why are you so interested in Prescott's handkerchief? Because it was in his left sleeve. Bathurst led the way through the library to the French doors and paused. Prescott was left-handed. I noticed because we bumped elbows all through dinner. Prescott would have carried his handkerchief in his right sleeve, not the left. Our killer has made a mistake. I was dumbfounded, trying to make sense of his statement. He could have carried it in the left. It's not impossible. We were on the pebbled path that wound beneath the billiard room balcony. No, not impossible, but very unlikely, he said as we rounded the corner of the manor. There they are, Bill. Footprints. He leaned over the shrubs without stepping on the exposed soil. A good-sized chap, I'd say. If you were he, and you wanted to get into the game room, how would you do it? I looked up, studying the dove-gray stone facade, with the shallowest of indents for mortar. There are no finger holds, so climbing straight up is out. The only choice left is to use the drain pipe there and then, well, leap to the windowsill. My thoughts exactly, Bathurst said. Well, up with you. Mind the footprints. Me? I sighed. I suppose I am Watson. I stepped into the landscaping, onto what I thought was a branch. I picked it up. Look at this. A cigar, he said, taking it from me and smelling it. Not a very good one. We'll take it to the inspector. Now, if you wouldn't mind. I reached for the thick drain pipe. Testing that it would hold my weight, I grabbed hold and leapt, planting my feet on the manor wall. Step by step, I scaled the pale wall, leaving impressions of each step. 14 feet and I was to the bottom on the window. 18 feet and I reached out, my fingers grasping the edge of the frame. That's enough, Bill. Come back down. Happily, down was significantly easier. I lowered myself to the point my head was below the billiard room window and pushed off. The soft ground gave way, softening my landing. Not much of a challenge, I said. So that proves it. Our killer is the elusive unknown murdering intruder. Bathurst shoved his hands in his pockets, studying the ground and the wall. No, Bill. We have proved exactly the opposite. The killer neither entered nor exited by the window. Let's find the inspector. He returned to the path, but I stopped him with a hand on his arm. What do you mean, Bathurst? I scaled that drain in minutes. Any half-able man could do the same. I agree, Bill. That is not the fact that negates the intruder. Then what does? I asked, and not politely. Bathurst smiled. I think I'll let you think about it for a bit. Then he pulled free and continued to walk. You aren't Holmes, I said as I chased after him, and I'm not Watson. There's no reason to keep this from me. There is one reason, he countered with a wry grin. It's fun.
It is fun, I'll admit. Whoops. I also have no voice.
No, it's a really common storytelling style with some of these detectives when they have the sidekick that is the narrator.
Yeah, just don't tell them anything.
And if you think about it, when the narrator is the detective, I don't know about you, but I sometimes get frustrated when the character whose head I'm in knows something and they don't tell me.
Exactly. What's the point?
So this kind of gets around that because, Bathurst knows what he knows. He's just not telling Bill.
I feel like the other reason not to tell Bill was there's a chance that he's the killer. Right? Everyone was there. Everyone could be the killer, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we know that Bill's not just because we're in his head, but even then we don't fully know that. It could turn around and he is the killer.
Yeah, this is one of those not locked room, but I can't remember the word for, it's a confined place.
Yeah.
So everybody in the house, with the exception of the unnamed help staff, is considered a suspect. All right.
Interesting.
At the stroke of midnight. Bathurst, Bill, glad you're back, Sir Charles said. The inspector here was about to start interviews, and I insisted he waited for you. Batterley was seated behind Sir Charles' desk in the library. Roper stood sentry duty at the room's entrance. To be clear, Batterley said through gritted teeth, I am allowing you to observe at Sir Charles' request. You are not to ask any questions or engage with my witnesses. We would never think to impose. Bathurst set the remnant of the cigar on the desk. By the way, Bill found this in the shrubbery outside the billiard room window. I assume you already saw the footprints? He pulled a wing chair in the corner forward and sat. I stood at Bathurst's side, notebook ready. Batterley did not look content but resigned. We did. Do you think the cigar belonged to the killer? Unlikely, Bathurst responded, but as it was out of place, it was worth noting. Batterley set it aside and looked at our host. We'll begin with you, Sir Charles. Walk me through last night and this morning, sir. There isn't much to say, Inspector. Jerry Prescott was alive and well at midnight when my wife and I retired for the night. He was quite the opposite when our maid found him this morning. There was no animosity between your guests? Batterley asked. No squabbles or sharp words that could have led to something deadly? Quite the opposite, Inspector. The lads had run the cricket field, chasing Ledbetter back across the river. We had a fine meal. Everyone was in good spirits. The inspector handed Sir Charles a folded letter. Do you recognize the handwriting, sir? Sir Charles inspected it. I do not. It seems Prescott was meeting someone. Batterley did not respond to the implied question. That will be all for now, Sir Charles. Roper, bring in Lieutenant Andrew Barker, Bathurst finished. Roper waited for Batterley's nod before escorting Sir Charles out and Barker in. The three of us remained waiting in silence, Batterley brooding, Bathurst calculating, me simply watching. Barker took the witness chair with the air of a man used to being behind the desk. His answers were concise and succinct. I met Prescott only 3 days ago. All I can tell you about him is he was a fair batsman. Batterley nodded, and a fair billiards player, I hear. You played with him last night? I did, Barker admitted, along with Tennant and Hornsby. But it was your marker Prescott walked away with, Batterley said accusingly. How much did you lose? Barker swallowed hard and turned away. That is not relevant to what we are discussing, Inspector. I determine what is relevant, Lieutenant Barker. How much? Barker stared at Batterley. Time passed, marked by the tick of the clock, until the answer finally came. 208 pounds. Bathurst looked up at me, and I truly had no idea of the amount. Well, Batterley said, that sounds like motive to me. He proceeded to ask Barker the usual questions about when he saw Prescott last and witnesses and such. Barker admitted to the conversation at the stairs, saying that it was about the note. Barker claimed he went to his room, the one beyond mine, not long after, and was there all night. Before dismissing him, Batterley handed Barker the sheet with the handwritten note and asked him if he recognized the handwriting. Barker studied it and then returned the sheet with a shake of his head. One by one, each of the family, the guests, and the household were questioned. The process took all day, and in truth, it was a very weary business. Batterley and Bathurst learned the order in which the people retired. First, Sir Charles and Lady Evelyn, then Captain Arkwright, his wife Helen and Mary. Myself, Bill Cunningham, was next. Tenant Daventry and Major Hornsby had one more whiskey. Jack, Bathurst, and Jerry Prescott closed the billiard room down for the night. The Considine family, the household staff, and Major Hornsby knew that the jeweled dagger was kept on the table in the parlor. Mary Considine was the last family member to be interviewed. She shyly shared that Jerry had asked her to marry him. This had come as a shock, but explained all about Jerry's attention to her. Did you accept his proposal? Batterley asked. No, Inspector. That is, not yet. She picked at the handkerchief she clutched. I was considering it, but I didn't know Mr. Prescott very well, and so, you see, I wasn't certain. And then I didn't know how good he was at golf, which only compounded the matter. Batterley looked at Bathurst and then at me. Mary has a rule, I explained. The man she marries must be able to beat her both at cricket and golf. She nodded. I couldn't abide being married to somebody I could outplay. Batterley lowered his head to look in her eyes. Did you meet Mr. Prescott last night, after everyone went to bed? No, I did not. She dropped her chin. I don't know if I would have married Jerry, but I know that I didn't want him murdered. The man who found Prescott hadn't seen much beyond the maid who found Prescott hadn't seen much beyond the body on the billiard table. She confirmed the window was open, as she saw it first. She hadn't noticed the disarray of furniture. The other interviews told and retold the story that I've already shared with you, so I won't take up your time here. No one admitted to seeing Prescott after he retired with Jack and Bathurst. The paper the inspector asked everyone to view was a letter scheduling a meeting with Prescott in the billiard room at, quote, the usual time. No one recognized the handwriting, myself included. Batterley rose, collecting his notes. That's all we can do for today, gentlemen. I'll be back in the morning. Everyone is to stay at the manor, and that includes you two. Of course. We'll see you to the door. Bathurst opened the door to the library and led the way into the main hall. What do you think of the case, Inspector? I acted as the butler and opened the door for the inspector and for Roper. At the stroke of midnight, Mr. Prescott was alive and 200 pounds to the good. 7 hours later, both of those statements were no longer true. Batterley placed his hat on his head and tucked his case under his arm. I'll know more tomorrow. Keep an eye on things here. Anything out of the ordinary happens, I want to know.
I wonder if something out of the ordinary happens. I guess we'll never know.
We will know, though. New odds and ends. I closed the door behind the police and turned to find Bathurst rocking on his heels. What? I asked. Prescott's room, Bill. We need to see it. We raced up the stairs to the first floor. turned our backs on the billiard room and climbed 9 steps to our floor. The hallway stretched to the front of the manor, with windows looking out over the side gardens. 7 bedroom doors lined the hall. The first room, the largest, was shared by Jack and Bathurst. It was Jack's alone, but he offered to share with the late arriving Bathurst. The rest of the rooms were singles, in this order: Daventry, Hornsby, Prescott, Tennant, myself, and Barker. Sir Charles took great pride in describing how he had each of the guest rooms remodeled. Private bathrooms had been constructed at the far end of the rooms, each having a bath, sink, and toilet. The door to the bathroom was opposite the door into the bedroom. Each room was furnished with a comfortable chair and a desk on either side of the entrance. The bed was set against the left-hand wall. An armoire was in the right corner. The bathroom doors were generally open to allow the light from the window into the bedroom. Prescott's bed was made, but rumpled, as if he had sat upon it. His dress shoes, the ones that went with his suit, were lying in front of the bed. His bedclothes were strewn across the bed, as if he had removed them in haste. "Interesting," Bathurst murmured as he went to the dressing table. "His wallet is here, a good amount of money. No IOU. He dressed quickly, I noted, or redressed. He didn't take his wallet or his watch." "Possibly," he said to himself more than me. "I'm going to take a closer look at the bathroom." Left alone in the main room, I thought to do the same. I dropped to my hands and knees and inspected under and around the bed. My thinking was that the constables would have gotten anything useful from the top. The floor under the bed was clean, but the molding had captured something. "Bathurst, come quickly!" Soon he was at my side, peering at the small paper caught on the thin ledge. Bathurst retrieved it and handed it to me. "You do the honors," he said. "You found it." It was a scrap of a letter, one torn and retorn. A feminine handwriting was clear. I read the words that had come from 4 different lines. "Meet me. Game. 1. Yours M." This is odd. I looked at Bathurst. "M? Mary?" "We shall ask her. Bill, while everyone is still downstairs, I want to have another look at the bedrooms. This may be our one chance." I nodded as I climbed to my feet. "Where to first?" "Let's start with Barker. Did you notice, Bill? The IOU you saw him give Prescott wasn't on the body, and it isn't in the room." It was not in Barker's room. Not that it proved anything, as I pointed out to Bathurst. If Barker was smart, he would have burned it. Tennant's and Hornby's room produced no IOU, nor anything else of interest. Daventry's room, on the other hand, produced something familiar. On the bathroom floor, behind the sink, was a cigar stub. Bathurst announced it was the same brand we found in the landscaping. I deferred to his opinion. We had retired to the room Bathurst shared with Jack, when the latter returned announcing that it was time to dress for dinner. As if being reminded that food existed, my stomach growled, amusing my friends. I returned to my own room to prepare.
It takes 16 stairs to get up to my second, to do each level of my apartment.
Yeah.
How do they do it in 9?
Well,
Those are some big stairs.
the ceilings aren't as no.
Our ceilings aren't tall whatsoever.
No, your ceilings are standard. You've been to England and stuff. There's a lot of rooms where like the ceilings
It's
are
got to be like 5 feet tall.
not that short, but they're not
9
as tall.
stairs. Okay, because our ceilings are 8 feet tall, and it still takes 16 stairs to get up. Those are some big ass stairs.
Okay, you know what? I took that directly from the original book, so I don't know. He said 9 stairs. It's 9 stairs.
I don't trust that. I think the stairs did it.
The stairs did not do it.
Also, really, the detectives came and flipped the place and didn't look under the bed? I'm sorry, but if I'm an old dude wanting to get rid of something and hide something quick, where am I going to put it? Under the bed. It's the easiest place. Look there. I am distraught.
Well, this wasn't just like lying on the floor under the bed. It had gotten stuck on the woodwork.
So they didn't even move the bed to look under?
I don't know.
You see cracks. There's cracks in the scheme here. I think the detectives are in on it. They didn't even look, did they?
The police detectives?
Exactly.
Roper?
Yes. Okay, maybe they didn't do it, but my point is, also, it's definitely not Mary. It's too obvious now.
Okay, definitely not Mary.
You can game these old-timey mysteries. They don't, they're not game-proof normally, except Agatha Christie does some stupid stuff. But, yeah, her mysteries piss me off. But, yeah, no, I totally don't think she did it. It might have been. Who are the suspects? Wait, I should listen to the rest of the story.
Yeah, we got 2 more chapters till we get to the deliberation.
Fine. But if I can guess it early, I get extra points, right?
Okay, yes, you get sprinkles.
Okay. I'm guessing the stairs.
Something out of the ordinary. Dinner was, to say the least, subdued. Lady Evelyn did her best to coax her guests into conversation. Each guest, in turn, did their best to talk about anything except Jerry Prescott. When Sir Charles called an end to dinner, with direction to retire to the parlor, a collective sigh of relief went up. Bathurst and I decided to divide and conquer our witnesses. I was to question Mary regarding the note. Bathurst took Daventry and the cigar. My opportunity came when Mary stepped to a sideboard to adjust flowers in a vase. I cleared my throat. "Mary, may I speak with you a minute?" "Bill," she turned, a soft smile. It faded, though, in a heartbeat. "What's happened now?" "Nothing," I said instantly to calm her. "Nothing at all. I just need to ask you about this." I held out the paper. "This is your handwriting, isn't it?" With barely a look, she said, "Yes, it is. Where did you get this?" "Jerry Prescott's room." I pointed back to the note. "It's only a portion of a note, I know, but it looks like you were setting up a clandestine meeting with him." Her brows furrowed. "I really don't understand this, Bill. This is my handwriting, but I did not write Jerry a note. I've never written Jerry a note, a letter, a poem, or a book." Her voice climbed with each written element. "I believe you," I said, taking her hands in mine. A sigh escaped. "Bathurst suspects that you planned to meet Prescott to tell him your decision. Had you, Mary? Had you made up your mind?" I was considering it." She looked away shyly. "You see, I had hoped that another—" She brought her eyes back to mine, and my heart soared. "You had hoped I would ask you?" She blushed, and it was all the encouragement I needed. I stepped closer, pulling our joined hands to my chest. "Will you marry me, Mary?" Her lips curled into a flirtatious grin. "Shall we play a round of golf?" "Tomorrow," I said, eager to win my prize. 10 in the morning. She nodded. "Until then." She pulled her hands from mine and went into the parlor. Just as my lovely Mary went in, Bathurst came out. "Did you talk to her?" he asked. "I did. She wrote the letter, but it was not to Prescott." I relayed the explanation. "What did Daventry have to say about the cigar?" Bathurst waved his hand, an annoyed look on his face. "Oh, what you would expect him to say. He had no idea how the stub got in his bathroom. It wasn't the brand he smoked. Let's go to the billiard room. Maybe something was overlooked." He climbed the stairs and I followed. "I understand the staff was given permission to put the room to rights. I doubt we'll discover anything new." "As am I," he said, hand on the doorknob, "but I want to look nonetheless." Inside, it was as if the day had never happened. The room stood ready to host the next group of card players and billiard sharks. Bathurst circled the table. I described him before as annoyed, but I think determined is a more accurate description. He began pulling the balls from the pocket. I didn't help. "Don't you think playing a game so soon after his death is in poor taste?" He looked up at me. "How long does one have to wait to use a table for its purpose?" I rolled 3 of the closest balls away from me. 1 went in the far pocket. "More than 12 hours, I should say." "It very well may be." Bathurst froze, his hand in the pocket, to recover the ball. "Bill, I found something." He pulled out a folded paper. "It's the IOU." I was stunned. "But how?" "I don't know," he said. "Prescott's hand was near this pocket. Perhaps he dropped it in when he was dying?" "Or he could have hidden it," I suggested. "Was it on top of the balls or under it?" "I don't know, Bill. I'll hold on to this for Batterley. What else could we have missed? In silence, we circled the room, looking high and low, opening everything that could be opened. It was at the window that something caught my attention. Bathurst, I said. The window is open again, and someone lurks below. Bathurst joined me and agreed with my statement. Come quickly, he said, hurrying out the door and down the steps. Jack was crossing the foyer and stopped when he saw us. Where have you two been? No time, Bathurst snapped. Someone lurks beneath the billiard room window. The devil there is. Jack turned and ran to the library. He was a step ahead of us getting through the French doors. With the same reckless abandon he displayed on the cricket field, he rounded the corner and threw himself upon the shadowed man. I followed his example, and soon we had our villain contained. Who is it? Bathurst asked. It's Tennant. Jack sat back on his haunches, breathing hard. Get off of me, Tennant shouted. Both of you. What are you doing out here? I asked. Revisiting the scene? Tennant twisted to see us. What? No! I thought I saw someone in the billiard room window and was curious. Jack guffawed. You've never been curious a day in your life. What are you really doing here? Best search him, I said. Maybe he went out the window and Bathurst and I went into the room. You're being ridiculous, Tennant charged. Hold him up, boys, Bathurst said. I'll search him. Jack and I lifted Tennant to his feet. He twisted, trying to break our grip, but failed. Bathurst's hands were not as deft as Batterley's, but he got the job done. A brown shoelace, Bathurst announced. That's not mine, Tennant shouted. Bathurst looked every inch as formidable as Batterley. Of that, I have no doubt. Mr. Prescott was the owner, I surmise. What should we do with him? Jack asked. Lock him in his room, Bathurst decided. Batterley will return in the morning. Another clue arrives. Captain Arkwright, Jack, Bathurst, and myself took shifts standing guard outside Tennant's room. The thought of having captured Prescott's killer did alleviate some of the strain on the Considine family. The night was long. When morning finally did come, the ladies opted for breakfast in their rooms. It was only us gentlemen that Batterley and Roper joined for breakfast. Bathurst explained our capture and subsequent detaining of Tennant. Batterley was less than impressed. There were fingerprints on the dagger, he said, and they did not belong to Mr. Tennant, but to Major Hornsby. Major, care to explain how they came to be there? Bathurst grinned with satisfaction. Those letters you had each of us look at were impostors. You were collecting fingerprints. Batterley nodded sharply. Major Hornsby pushed away from the table. I handled the dagger 2 or 3 nights ago. I had once seen a similar piece in France and admired it greatly. I returned it to the cradle where it sat on the table in the parlor. Did anyone show particular interest in you at the time? Bathurst asked. Hornsby cocked his head as he considered. Well, yes, Prescott did. Well, we can't ask him, Batterley said. Anything else I need to know about Bathurst? Bill and I found this in the billiard room pocket. He gave him the slice of paper. It's the IOU. Barker perked up at this announcement. I thought it was lost. And now it's found, Batterley countered. He looked between the note and the gambler. A lot of reasons to want a man dead. Barker shook his head. And risk my commission? No. I'll pay my debt in full to Prescott's family. There are many reasons worth killing for. A billiards debt isn't one of them. Mary stepped into the doorway, dressed for the links. Are you ready for our game, Bill? Absolutely, I said as I rose. Bathurst, in the mood to caddy for me? I'm afraid not, Bill. I will accompany the inspector to question Tennant. Batterley cleared his throat. I understand, Lady Mary, that a note in your writing was found in Mr. Prescott's room. What can you tell me about it? As silly as it may sound, Inspector, nothing. Mary recounted recognizing her handwriting, but having never written to Prescott. She handled Batterley's question marvelously. If that is all, Bill and I have a date. Daventry, I said immediately. Care to caddy? Daventry agreed readily for any reason to be out of the house for several hours. Jack volunteered to caddy for Mary as he understood the stakes. We three went to change into attire more appropriate for the course. I was confident I would win. It wouldn't be easy. I'd seen firsthand Mary's prowess with a putter, yet I knew I would prevail and that she wanted me to. In my eagerness, I dressed quickly. I found Mary talking with Bathurst in the dining room. "Darling, your boot has come untied." "Again?" she said crossly. "This will be the 4th time I've tied it." I dropped to my knee and did the honors. A simple bow tie is not sufficient for active wear. This is an old seaman's knot, guaranteed to last through rough seas or a round of golf, whichever comes first. She laughed, taking my hand as I rose. "Thank you, Bill. And here are our caddies. Let's be off." I looked at Bathurst. "Wish me luck." Bathurst looked from me to Mary and back again. "I don't think luck is what you'll need."
I know who did it.
Hold on. First, we're going to remind people that Mysteries to Die For remains ad-free. And in exchange for not making you hit the fast forward button, support our authors by checking out their backlists and picking up a title. This week it's me, TG Wolff. You can find me on my website, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. If you like my storytelling style, try a book or two.
Yay.
Okay, you're going to let me actually read the deliberation stuff?
Yes,
Okay,
fine.
okay. Bathurst may have gotten ahead of himself promising Scotland Yard results in the death of Jerry Prescott. Let's see if we can help him save face in front of Batterley. There are a lot of people, so we're going to do some grouping. Here are the people in the billiards room that night. So we have the billiards player, Lieutenant Barker, Major Hornsby, and Tennant with Prescott. So
Okay.
those 4 played. Bill, he watched and was drinking whiskey, so he's our narrator.
Okay.
Then we have Mary Considine and Helen Arkwright, so they played the piano and sung.
Interesting.
Stupid allergies. And then we have Sir Charles and Daventry, Lady Evelyn and Captain Arkwright, who played bridge.
Okie dokie. Well, that's a lot of people.
There were a lot of characters in this, but if you group them together, it's not that bad.
I suppose.
All right, now we have a list of facts
Given
that Bill
to me.
shared with us. Prescott was found in the billiards room, strangled with his own shoelace, and then stabbed with a dagger. He died
Interesting.
sometime between midnight and 7 a.m.
Okay.
The billiards room was upset with overturned chairs, but there was no sign of a fight or resistance on the body.
Interesting.
Prescott won at billiards, walking away with an IOU from Barker for over 200 pounds.
Eh.
Barker claimed he intended to pay and had no interest in endangering his career. Bathurst found the IOU in a corner pocket.
Interesting.
Bill reported discovering Prescott and Barker in a hushed conversation. Prescott delayed going to bed, but Bill didn't stay to listen to why. Prescott was the
Okay.
last in the group to go to bed, which included Jack and Bathurst.
Alrighty. Well, makes sense, seeing as he died.
He died. Hornsby's fingerprints were found on the dagger. He admits to handling it the night before in the room where it was kept. He said Prescott showed interest in the dagger.
Ah.
A stub of a cigar was found on the flower bed underneath the billiard room window. The same brand of cigar stub was found in Daventry's bathroom behind the sink.
Weird.
Tennant, found lurking in the flower bed, was tackled by Jack Considine and Bill, and when searched, the brown shoelace was in his pocket. He claimed not to know how it got there.
That's what they all say.
Yeah. Mary said Prescott asked her to marry him. She hadn't answered yet. Bill found a piece of note in Prescott's room, and Mary acknowledged it was her handwriting, but denied writing to Prescott or planning to meet him.
Okay.
So, in whose direction should Bathurst apply his self-lauded logic skills?
So I lied when I said I know who did it. Here's the thing. There are like 2 characters who are barely mentioned. It's Helen and the other sister, right?
Mary and Helen?
Isn't there another sister?
There's the mother, Evelyn.
Evelyn, Helen, and Mary. We don't really hear anything about Evelyn and Helen.
No, this is really the man story. The only female character that really has a role is Mary. The others are merely there.
Okay, so we're eliminating those dose people. Now, Mary, weird person. But here's the thing. Mary's... Okay, we have to find out who could have tied the knot, right?
Yep.
And we discovered that, that the Bill knows how to tie the knot.
Yeah, he's the one who identified it as an Ian knot.
He identified it and then proceeded to tie the knot on Mary's shoe, which is a weird thing to add in my opinion. Maybe it was Bill.
Maybe it was Bill.
Is Bill a suspect?
Everybody's a suspect who is in the billiard room. So, yes, Bill is on the suspect list. So, Bathurst and Jack, if you remember, were smoking down in the garden, but they came back up to the billiard room at the end of the night, so they too are on the list.
Who's Jack again?
Jack is the Considine brother that they're friends with.
And who's Tennant again?
Tennant is just one of the other cricket players. So Tennant and Daughtry are cricket players.
Daughtry?
Doherty? What did I call it?
We have another suspect?
No.
We're going to say
Daventry.
Daventry. Oh, right.
Daventry.
And he
was playing bridge.
Oh, my God. There's too many people. Okay. So we've eliminated the two sisters.
So I'm going to, on my script here, I'm going to mark them out in red so you can kind of see. So you eliminated Mary and you eliminated Helen.
And Evelyn, who's
and you
on
eliminated
the list.
Evelyn. Okay.
Oh, Evelyn is on the list.
So you eliminated all three women.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I want to eliminate Sir Charles.
Okay.
It'd be pretty cool if it was him, but something seems odd.
Okay.
Tennant, I do believe was framed, so I'm going to say no Tennant.
No Tennant?
No Tennant.
Okay.
Major Hornsby and Lieutenant Barker, both being military men, would theoretically know how to make the knot, right?
Let's give that the benefit of the doubt. I don't really know the answer to that question.
Maybe I'm putting too much value on the knot.
So Barker was the one who lost the money and had the IOU, and Hornsby's fingerprints were found on the dagger.
Well, yeah. Okay. There's really something pointing to everybody.
There is really something pointing to everybody.
So who could have physically done it? So we know the last two people to have left was Prescott and then what was it, Hornsby?
The people who went up together last to bed.
Yes.
Were Jack Considine.
It was Jack.
Bathurst, and Prescott.
All at the same time?
Yes.
I thought one went up first.
No, the three of them were in the last group to go up.
Okay.
So you want me to read that part again?
No. That's okay. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to win this one, guys. Let's see. So Lieutenant Barker lost all the money.
Yes.
I'm going to say it's not him.
I did the translation, like 200 pounds in 1921 would be like $10,000 today.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
It was a lot of money.
So you said not Barker.
I'm going to say not Barker. We've all lost money. It's okay. And, he is right. Losing his livelihood over losing a bit of money isn't worth it.
Yeah.
And he can see that clearly.
Yep.
So I'm going to say it's not him.
Okay.
We also have Major Hornsby.
Yep.
I'm going to keep him on the list.
Okay.
We have Bill.
We have Bill.
Honestly, Bill's looking like a pretty good suspect.
Okay.
The only thing is we were in his perspective, so unless we just skipped the part where he murdered someone, we did see that he was asleep during that time. Right? Didn't we?
We saw when he went up to bed, and we saw that he said that it took time for him to fall asleep, and he didn't really fall asleep till 5 a.m.
Interesting. Well, Bill, I think we might have a killer. It'd be pretty cool if the main character was the killer, wouldn't it? All right, I might be wrong. I very well may be wrong. Let's see. Who was the other detective?
Bathurst.
Bathurst. And where was Bathurst?
So for most of the night, Bathurst and Jack were down in the garden smoking.
Okay.
But they came back upstairs. That's when Sir Charles called the end to the night.
Mm-hmm.
And Bathurst and Jack stayed around in the billiard room with Prescott. So Jack closed the room up. Remember, he turned the lights off. He closed the windows.
So they found a cigar outside the room.
Mm-hmm.
That just doesn't really prove anything. I don't think it really proves anything. It proves that someone was there, but if Jack and Bathurst were out there smoking, they could have been there anyway. But of course, it has to mean something, or else, well, why would it be written into the story?
I did the adaptation of the story. I did not write the original story.
Interesting. All right. Well, the two detectives actually seem like pretty good suspects. Jack could easily have done it, I think. But I'm going to put my money on Bill.
All right. He is putting his money on Bill. I am highlighting Bill Green.
Great.
All
for
right.
money.
I didn't even think about that. All right. So before we go into this, just a quick reminder for those of you who also love reading mysteries that there are print and ebook companions to our season. This season's book is being released in 2 parts. Opening Gambit dropped in March 2024, and Final Move will drop in September. So buy one for you and for a mystery lover you love. The dimes and quarters from the book sales do support the podcast and keep Jack in mismatched socks and zucchini-free zucchini bread.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. Prescott died after proposing to this woman, and the woman was like, nah, and now he's dead, and she's like, actually, I like you, and is now courting another dude. Wow.
Well, she
Heartless.
didn't encourage.
Heartless.
She didn't encourage Jerry. You gotta remember, this is the 1920s.
This is cruel.
She even said she didn't know him that well.
This is Gatsby era.
Yeah.
Gatsby was a tragedy.
I haven't read it yet. I have it down on my to-be-read shelf.
We watched it like 2 days ago, the movie.
Oh.
It was weird, by the way.
So I should
really
read
weird
it?
cinematography.
Oh.
Kanye West's music was in it. Why? It's 1920s.
Like, that won't be part of the book.
Right? I didn't get that, really. It was an odd choice, in my opinion. All right, let's figure out if Bill did it.
Okay, it's time for Too Many Suspects. Nature smiled upon us that morning. Mary teed off first. Her drive straight down the fairway landed a good 150 yards away. My drive outdistanced her by some 75 yards, but landed to the left, in the rough. She smiled at me and then slid her driver into the bag her brother carried. Oh yes, the game was definitely afoot. As the sun crested its apex and began to descend, we were neck and neck. Mary had pulled ahead and I'd started to sweat, but she lost a ball in a water trap. Given the unladylike language that followed, she did not muff the shot as a favor to me. Going into the 17th hole, we were tied. Never had the stakes been so high, and yet I remained confident I would prevail. Mary studied the green, determined to recover from a bad lay. She putted and then watched me rather than the ball. I heard the ball fall into the cup, and she frowned. The inspector and Mr. Bathurst are here. I turned as the new arrival stepped to the green. Inspector, Bathurst, come to watch the end of our match? The inspector approached our group. Lady Mary, please retrieve your ball. Mary looked to her brother and then to me, fear etched on her face. I'll get it, I said, bending and putting my hand in the cup. A metal bracelet of a handcuff closed around my wrist. Bill Cunningham, the inspector, said, "You are under arrest for the murder of Jerry Prescott." I stood up, my gaze upon my beautiful Mary. The denial in her eyes turned to anguish. She buried her face in her brother's chest. "Come along," Batterley said. Batterley on one side, Bathurst on the other. I went along peacefully, enjoying the countryside. "How did you know?" I asked. "You almost pulled it off," Batterley said. "There were too many suspects to tell fact from folly." Barker's IOU, Bathurst said, Devontrey's cigar butt, Tennant's shoelace, Hornsby's fingerprints, Mary's note. A little something pointed to each one, which by definition pointed away from everyone. Everyone and no one, which logically meant it was someone else. "What about the elusive anonymous stranger?" I asked. "No one went in or out by the window," Bathurst said, "including Prescott. His shoes were clean, which they would not have been given the evening rain. There were footprints, yes, footprints you planted along with the cigar. Anyone climbing in the window would leave footprints on the wall. There were none. Anyone climbing out the window would make a deeper impression in the soft ground. There was none. No, everything that happened within the house, except for you planting the shoelace on Tennant. You had it on you. I wonder, where would you have put it if Tennant hadn't happened to be in the flower bed? I didn't answer. He was the one playing Holmes. You spoke with Barker and Prescott at the foot of the stairs, he continued. When Prescott said he was not immediately retiring, you saw your opportunity. You did go up, but to his room, not your own. You hid. I suspect Prescott changed into his nightclothes. At some point, the opportunity presented itself, and you strangled him from behind with the shoelace you had removed. Then you redressed him, complete with the brown shoes and handkerchief. You made 2 mistakes there. First, you put the handkerchief in the wrong sleeve, but that did not uniquely point to you. The shoe, however, you tied with a knot that you called the Ian knot, and when you tied Mary's boot for golf, you used another complex knot. No one else in the manor had such knowledge. Bathurst brought us to a stop. Answer me one question, Bill. Where did the note in Mary's handwriting came from? I decided to assuage my friend's curiosity. Mary had written it to me last summer. She was to pick me up at the train station. Batterley began walking again. You must have been planning to murder Prescott for some time. I again did not respond. Bathurst, however, did. I don't think so, Inspector. I think Bill here saw Prescott's interest in Mary and sought to put it to an end. Permanently. There was some thought put in, absolutely. But Bill did not come to this house party intending to commit murder. This was all such a waste, Bill. Mary Considine would have chosen you over Prescott. You threw away your life and Prescott's. A good thing you were on the case, Bathurst, Batterley said. The young lady will recover and go on to marry another, while this one is a permanent guest of Bathgate. In the 8 years I've been in prison, Mary has not visited me once. Bathurst comes occasionally, and through him I've learned that she married Major Hornsby. He beat her in golf by 1 stroke the day after my trial. The end. How did you get that it was Bill?
Truthfully, I was sitting here during the story thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote a Detective Connolly story where he did it? And then, everything just came together, and I was like, huh.
Okay, so
these are weird facts.
I was reading the story, and I picked one to do an adaptation, and I was about at that 3/4 point where everything's supposed to come together, and it wasn't. And I was just like, how did I pick the hottest mess of a mystery to do this? I never saw it coming. I was totally blindsided when he was arrested during golf. And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm going back and I'm like rereading it over and over again. So this story on Goodreads does not have awesome reviews. It's like a
Really?
3.5. And I think if you're reading it as a pure sort of mystery reader, you could be like, oh, that sucked. Like, I didn't even know he was a suspect type thing.
Yeah.
But if you consider that it was written in 1921,
Mm-hmm.
and at the beginning, the conversation that they had about all the different detectives at the time, I have to wonder if that wasn't somewhat autobiographical. And you can see an author. So this was Brian Flynn's first book, the first book for Bathurst as a detective. And you could see somebody going, what if Watson did it?
Yeah.
And so from that point, it becomes really rather brilliant because, number one, Bill did not insert himself into the position of narrator. Bathurst dragged him in.
Yeah.
Number two, from the time of that designation, Bill does not lie to us.
No, he doesn't. That's what gets so confusing.
Yeah, because when you're like, we know he was asleep, I'm like, well, he doesn't actually say he was asleep. It said he went up to bed, but he didn't sleep well.
Indeed. Well, part of what gave it away to me was still the knot thing. I kept getting stuck on it, going, no one else knows how to make this knot.
Yep.
We can assume the others do, but he said also, why would you admit you recognize the knot?
Well, I think there was a part of him that was, I'm sure it's a writerly thing, but too, I think a part of him was trying to be valuable.
Yeah, that is true.
So this is a full-length novel that I've turned into a 8,000-word short story. There
Wow.
was a whole other sub-story that turns out to be a red herring about jewelry that's missing from Evelyn's room at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And so there actually was somebody outside the window, but it was related to the theft. And
Oh.
that was just too big to fit into this
Yeah.
framework.
Plus, it would make sense because that makes Evelyn and Helen real characters, which they're not quite in this small
Helen was
adaptation.
never a character.
Oh, really?
And honestly, Arkwright isn't either. I mean, most of the characters are the ones who get evidence planted on them.
Okay.
But it was, I mean, if anybody wants to read the full book, like I said, it's available for free from Project Gutenberg. I absolutely loved it. After I got through, I was kind of funny because I was all in my head like, this sucks. There is no suspect. Everybody's a suspect. And then you get to the end and you're like, okay, that was actually really cool.
It is one of those that's probably more fun to read in hindsight, to reread, than it is to read for the first time. I mean, it is cool to read for the first time and just the whole time going, I don't have a freaking clue.
Right.
But no, between the knot and the sleeping thing didn't make sense. And part of me thought it might have been the sisters who had written the note to Mary, and maybe because they know her her handwriting, and they could have forged it. That was an idea for a second, but then, clearly that wasn't the case. And eventually Mary did just admit it was her handwriting, but she didn't remember writing it.
Because she
never gave
didn't.
anything.
Because
Yeah.
she wrote it to Bill.
And the cigar didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yep.
It was just like, it's there, sure, but it doesn't fit anywhere in the timeline.
Well, and that was the thing when I read it in the full-length novel. I was obsessed. This cigar, I think I put it behind the sink, and it might have been found on the sink. And it didn't make sense because the point you made, like the cops would have found it. So how did the cigar get there? And I
Right.
thought it was an error in the writing. And I'm just like, but what about the cigar? And
I
it turned
suppose
out
that's the same case to then the note underneath the bed. If he put it there, of course the cops didn't find it the first time around. He put it there.
yeah.
So yeah.
So he was a busy little guy in ways that we didn't get to see.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love this. So
I feel like you would have had a better chance framing one person than everybody.
oh, absolutely.
Because he did absolutely show everybody to, like, the detectives to everyone but him, and he did somehow get put in a way that makes you as the audience think, well, it can't be him then. And it does the same thing to, like, Sir Charles. You go, well, maybe he did it because there's nothing on him.
The only thing I could think of is maybe he wanted it to be so muddled that nobody was, like, he wasn't actually trying to frame somebody.
It seems
He
like
was just trying to get away with it.
Yeah.
Because you're
Keep
absolutely
them all
right.
distracted with everyone else while you run off with the girl.
If he chose to just frame Hornsby, since Hornsby had already, I was even like, why stab him after you strangled him?
That was to get the other guy
Yeah,
his
Hornsby.
fingerprints on it. That was the only reason.
Yeah.
Which I don't quite know how he stabbed him and left fingerprints on there and not his.
I don't know.
But I mean, he was already dead, so it wouldn't have been hard. You don't have to stab really hard,
I don't
Also
know.
explains why there wasn't a lot of blood.
Yes.
Because if you're not stabbing it
it's
into a
not-
live person
yeah.
with the goal of killing him, really you're just doing it to put the fingerprints there.
Yep. And there was a lot of, we'll call it luck, because he moved the body from the bedroom down to the billiards room without being seen.
Yeah. I kind of forgot he didn't kill him in the billiards room.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't know until right now.
Oh, yes, he did not kill him in the billiards room. You basically get the debrief from Bathurst, which, as Bill doesn't correct it, we're going to assume is correct.
Ah.
So.
Well, pretty cool.
So you want to learn about billiards?
I'd love to.
So we turn to the website Games for Fun to learn about billiards. Billiards includes all sports that are played with a cue, stick, and billiards ball. So pool, which is also called pocket billiards, carom billiards, and snooker are all categories of billiards. Our story today referred to a billiards table, but is more accurate to call it a pocket billiards table or a pool table. The Billiard Congress of America reports the game started as an outdoor game described as similar to croquet. It was brought indoors on a tabletop game, possibly originating in France. Initially, it retained some of the hoops and sticks of the outdoor game, but those eventually faded. There are many ways to play billiards, ranging from using 3 balls to 22 balls, with and without pockets. Here's a fun fact. Visitors from England taught Americans how to put a spin on the cue ball, explaining why only in America is that spin called English, putting English on a ball. Check out the sources. So there's 2 in the show notes, one for Games for Fun and one for Billards Congress of America. I also want to introduce you, if you are not already a fan of Brian Flynn. The Billiard Room Mystery was the first case for barrister Anthony Bathurst and the first mystery for English author Brian Flynn. It was challenging to find information on the author, even though he has over 54 books to his name. The best write-ups were on Classic Mystery Novel Blog and Crime as a Foot blog. Born in 1885 in Essex, England, Flynn, like many others of that period, had a varied background. His formal education ended when he went into civil service, serving as a special constable during World War I. He taught while he worked for the government and enjoyed acting. It was reported that he began writing mysteries because he was not impressed with much of what he read. I can believe that, reading the scene where he's critiquing the styles of the fictional detectives. Like, that totally is, you could say it was kind of autobiographical. The Billiard Room Mystery is now in public domain and can be downloaded from Project Gutenberg. Dean Street Press has been reprinting much of Brian Flynn's catalogs, and they can be found on online retailers. So there are several links in the show notes to information about Brian Flynn. About me? Well, like you, I'm not one thing. I'm a writer, an engineer, a wife, and a mother. What's first on the list depends on the day. Beyond the title I claim, I'm a person who loves learning and thoroughly enjoys a good puzzle. I'm creative and get bored easily. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Case Western Reserve University and a Master of Science in Civil Engineering from Cleveland State University, which gives me absolutely no background in writing, but I do it anyway. Writing mysteries and engineering isn't as different as you'd think. Both require using logic and process to get from a starting problem to a solution. Find me at tgwolff.com. And that wraps up this episode of Mysteries to Die For. Support our show by subscribing and telling a mystery lover about us, giving us a 5-star review. Check out our website, tgwolff.com/podcast, for links to this season's authors. Mysteries to Die For is hosted by TG Wolff and Jack Wolff. Death in the Billiards Room was written by TG Wolff, adapted from The Billiard Room Mystery by Brian Flynn. Music and production are by Jack Wolff. Episode art is by TG Wolff. Join us next week for a toe tag, and then come back here in 2 weeks for our next original story, Tethered to Drama by Karina Bartaw, where tetherball is the featured game. All right, Jack, take us out.